So for people joining live, just getting started, just making sure everything is set up as always. It looks like we're good on Facebook. Perfect. And we're good on YouTube. All right. So with that, we'll start recording in 3, 2, and 1. Good morning, evening, afternoon, magical spiritual beings. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Cosmic Love Antenna. Today's chat, today's cosmic dance into a topic that I know you're going to love is a community coaching episode. For people that are new to the platform, this is a type of show that I do with a powerful member of the community who I'll introduce in 2 seconds here, that sets the intention of going a bit deeper than normal into a particular topic to not just help the beautiful community member that I have on the show, but also help all of you unravel a theme and a category that I feel can sometimes leave us a bit confused within this healing, awakening, spiritual conversation. Today's topic is connecting into being a sensitive and emotional man, sensitive and emotional man, shifting from weakness into power. And to do this today, I have a beautiful member of the community, Mr. Justin Poole. Justin, do you want to say hello, my friend?
Hello, Harrison. Thank you so much for welcoming me into your space. I'm looking forward to doing a dance.
Me too, Justin. I was just reflecting before we started recording. I felt quite nervous. I was like, "Ooh, this is good nerves," because I know that this topic is very important to you. It's very important to me, and I know that we're going to get into some depths today. So I thank you for being here. Before I pass back to you, I just want to welcome people that are joining live today on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. If you have any comments that pop up for you as we go deeper, please leave them in the comment section. And if you're listening to this on the podcast today and you think this can help not just a man in your world, but anyone in your world, please share this out and spread the love. All right, Mr. Justin, I want to start here today with first breaking down, why is this topic important to you? I had the pleasure of spending some time with you one-on-one, and we hit on some of these topics. So I know why it's important to you, but I would love to hear from your heart so everyone can sort of tap in. Why is being a sensitive and emotional man, why is it important in your world?
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to have to give a bit of background, if that's all right. So
Please.
I'll go back to the very beginning of this life, at least. When I was young, I grew up in a rural area, right? And so I had a lot of connection with nature, a lot of time to spend by myself, and it was a beautiful environment to grow up in. And there were certain things that I noticed in that life, particularly around the fact that I would never feel alone. I always just felt I could just go out for hours and hours, just be in the forest, and I never felt alone. And so there was, as time went on, I grew up in an environment whereby I had and I still do, an extremely loving mother and father, but they expressed that love in very different ways. And particularly as I got older, my relationship with my father sort of gave me a sense of feeling like separated from myself. And I know that my mother tried really hard to sort of fill that gap, but there's only so much she could do in that space.
Yeah.
And so as I got older, I sort of got this sense of sort of anger, resentment building. And that took me kind of into my teens, and I didn't know how to express that. And I certainly see it now with having kids. My daughter is kind of the same. I call her my fairy girl because she's here in this physical world, but she is in another dimension half
Yeah.
the time,
She's a
and
powerful being.
a very powerful being. And I can really relate to that, and I see that from a completely different angle now. And
Yeah.
so as I got older, and I saw that there were other men around me in my life who acted different, who I had a different relationship with, and it really opened up my mind to actually there's many different ways to be a man. And certainly the environment that I grew up in with my father is he was, he was very much that sort of that macho masculine
Yeah.
archetype. So what that how that played out with me was I developed sort of a fear, if you
Yeah.
will, of that. And what that led to is ultimately me seeking, trying to seek acceptance from him, not realizing that he was giving it, but that I wasn't receiving it in the way that I needed to receive it.
Yeah.
Um, so as I got older, um, throughout my life, I grew up with an interesting religious practice, right? So my parents were Sufis, universal Sufism, right,
Mm.
where we sort of like practiced all religions, right? So it was a different environment to how many people perhaps had a suppression mindset. I grew up in an environment where I was encouraged to ask questions, encouraged to experiment, to try things. Right. So it was very nurturing from that perspective. Um, but what that ultimately led to as I got into being a younger man is a lot of those spiritual practices, fasting and meditation. I did to a quite an extreme extent. So I used to, do long sort of multi-day fasts. I used to go and do lots of Vipassana courses
Mm.
and meditate for long periods of time. And I saw on reflection after doing that for many years that I wasn't doing that from a place of love.
Mm.
I was doing that to punish myself.
Mm.
And it really brings me to what brought me to you is essentially
Mm.
is I started as I got older and I'm approaching my 40s now, is seeing, wow, I have this immense power within me. But my whole life I've spent fearing it. I don't know how to handle it. And
Mm.
I've used all my energy suppressing it, all my energy
Mm.
trying to punish myself. And there's a sense of how do I balance that? It's a
Yeah.
beautiful dance to do, but it's a daily challenge. And I don't think I'm alone in this.
No.
I see it so much, and I see it being expressed in many different ways. um, and so that's really what's brought me to this passion for trying
It's
to understand it.
it's beautiful, Justin. Thank you for sharing all of that. Like I alluded to, I know your story, but I just am very grateful that you shared that with everyone here on the show because you're not alone, right? And this is why I'm very passionate about the work that I do in the world. And I was very passionate about bringing you on the show to have this discussion. So not just men out there can start to shift and learn and expand, but also, the beautiful women in the lives of men can understand and go a bit deeper into these topics. So thank you for highlighting that, Justin. We're going to shift into some questions now that I know you have on your heart in relation to this topic, and we'll bring some more value to people tuning in. So what's first on your list, my friend, that we can dive into?
Well, first, I'd like to explore that bit that we just sort of touched on there
Yeah.
was, I've obviously with you done some inner child work, and I've found that really powerful. And you've obviously got a lot of content and resources on practices that you can do. And I
Yep.
think as for myself, the practical nature is something that really works well for me. And I think,
Yes.
and it sort of seems to be a theme that I find with other men as well. We like to do things despite knowing that we're not human doings, we're human beings.
Yep.
It's sort of in our nature, and it really helps me when I'm trying to work through something emotional. Like, what do I actually do? And
Yeah.
often I come back to starting with my body.
Yes.
And you've talked about this many times,
Yep.
things like how do you what do you eat? How do
Yeah.
you move your body? Do you move it? and what
Yes.
ways do you move it? Do you engage in play, and how does that play look? How does
Yeah.
it feel? What are you connecting with the different parts of yourself? So that's really the challenge that I have, is that energy that I feel and that playfulness, right? That beautiful, loving inner child,
Yeah.
from the chakra system that you talk about. You talk about it residing, the in the same part of the body
Yes.
that sexual, creative, powerful energy is sitting, right? And
Yes.
so there's a beautiful, elegant dance that has to go on between nurturing this inner child that's in the same place, but also harnessing this immense power and allowing it to channel. So
Yes.
my question is, what are some of the most useful practices that you find in getting that balance between those two things, which seem almost at opposing poles?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm gonna, for people tuning in, I'll put some resources that Justin was referring to in the show notes. I've done a few episodes on both the inner child and the chakras and how they connect together. So if you want to go deeper into this topic, check out the show notes and I'll put links there. But let's break this down simply first. And I want to go back to something you said, Justin, around the masculine body, the masculine physical body wanting to take practical action. And I firstly sort of want to, before I give some practical tips here, I want to highlight the need to release judgment around that. Because a lot of men I've run into, myself included, there's judgment in society around both polarities, around the doing and the non-doing, right? It could be from overdoing, from overworking as a man, or it could be not doing enough, right? Feeling like you're not worthy, you're not valuable, you're not ticking the box unless you're doing all the things. So the first, and this is a practical tip in itself, Justin, for all the men listening, to unlock that space is to observe in that space where you're holding on to any judgment, right? Judgment on both the action you are currently taking or the non-action that needs to be taken also, right? So that's the first piece, is really looking at judgment, because when you look at the sacral space, that is where that inner child and that sexual creation energy resides, as you just described. The sacral center is also one of the main areas of the body where we start to relate to our emotions at large. So what I'm getting at here is, if you are a man that's holding on to any kind of judgment towards your action or non-action, it's going to hold itself in that sacral space. And it's going to be very hard to do anything. Let's use your example, Justin, of wanting to move the body in a playful way. You're not going to be able to do that if you're unconsciously holding on to resentment around that play, right? So that's the first piece that I would get at. Does that resonate, Justin, with your experience?
Absolutely. And it's one of these things, and to get a bit more specific
Yes.
and a bit more, add some more life to it. One of the things that I've noticed in terms of the relationship with my inner child and the way it plays out sexually is there's a huge amount of fear and need
Yes.
for power and control. And
Yes.
there's this thing that plays out, and mostly it plays out in my head, fortunately, but I spend a lot of time making sure it only ever plays out in my head. And a lot of energy goes into suppressing that.
Yeah.
And yes, there's a lot of guilt that's held in doing that. It's like the sort of the sense of, oh, I shouldn't be having these kind of thoughts or these kind of feelings. But yet knowing in myself that actually it's a very natural thing that's playing out. There's this inner child that's fearful, that wants love, that's calling
Yes.
out, and and it's going, all right, well, if I can't do that, then I'm going to control something. At least I can have
Yes.
control of something. So it plays it out in a very strange way, which sometimes just uses up a lot of energy just to keep it suppressed.
I want to hit on something there, Justin. This is a practical tip in itself that we can look for as a sensitive and emotional man. You said the word control, right? You're talking about it from the inner child and the sexual lens, but let's expand it. When we as a male, this applies to females too, but I'm just going to speak about men because that's the topic here today. As the male, as soon as we start to apply and feel the urge to control anything, that in itself is a indicator of something needing loving attention, right? Because control, in many ways, and you just alluded to this, Justin, is a way for us to not feel, is a way for us to not move through pain, is a way for us to not be overcome by fear in many ways. But we know that feeling it is the solution. We know that moving through it is the solution. So I'll throw this back to you, Justin, but when we observe this urge to control something, that is the piece to look at. We can ask the question, okay, let's use the inner child as an example. What does the inner child need in this moment to release control? What does the inner child need in this moment to be able to surrender and accept the moment at hand? How does that feel, Justin, when I say that?
From some of the practices that you've given me, which is the embodiment of exactly what you're saying, we're recognizing that as a point of awareness, as something, as a symbol that's popping up, as something that I can grab and say, all right, I'm hearing something talking to me right now. I can do something now. That's 100% how it feels. It feels like this the sense that the inner child is wanting to speak. It's wanting to be listened to.
Yes.
And in order for me to listen, I have to go through and connect with other parts of myself to get to that. And there's so many
Yes.
different practical ways in which that can be done.
Yes.
And you've talked about it many times before, but even sexual play with myself in a different
Yes.
way, in a loving way, is an immense way to sort of, I think, connect. It's often I feel like sexual acts sometimes in the way that I play them out can be disconnecting, but it can be done in a very connecting way, which
Very,
is a
very
complete opposite.
connecting.
And all it takes is a sort of a different mindset, setting an intention
Yes.
when going through the motion. And it's
I'm
it's
so
incredible.
I'm so proud of you, Justin. It's so nice to stand in your reflection and the embodiment of these practices that you're sharing. I want to just highlight this for people that are new to what you're saying, because you're seemingly talking about two topics here, but they connect together. This sexual sensitive connection within the male body and the inner child. And I think for a lot of people, there has been a disconnection between sexual energy, which I would count as part of this sensitive and emotional body, and the inner child. So I want to make this very clear for everyone that's new to this topic. A core inner child need, so a need that you need to have met as a child growing up, is sexual connection, is healthy sexual connection. But for most of us, Justin, myself, we had the opposite. We either suppressed the inner child sexual connection. We ignored it. We were told to feel guilty, shameful for it due to outside influences, religion, family, culture, etc. Or we were hyper over pushed into what sex should look like by porn, by maybe a culture that over sexualizes certain elements. So for people tuning in, one way that you can open up your sensitive emotional nature, male or female, but let's just stick to men, is to ask the inner child, how can that sexual need be met? And Justin is giving some really good examples. So anything else you want to add to this, Justin, or we can go on to another question?
Yeah, no, that's exactly how it plays out. This connecting, and it does seem like a contrast, because we are taught, okay, inner child, sex. These things are not in the same sentence, right? And so there's a whole lot of judgment around that, when really what we're talking about is coming from a place of love within ourselves to connect
Exactly.
with ourselves. We're not talking about anything else. And so it's such a powerful thing to deal with. But yes, like you've said, working through all the environmental changes, all the things that we've been influenced by, particularly porn, and I can speak personally from that point of view, it's incredibly hard to rewire that, and it takes a lot of discipline, but the discipline has to come from love, right? Not from, as I've learned, not from pushing and coming from a point of needing to punish myself.
Guilt and shame.
Yes, 100%.
Love it, Justin. Hit me with your next question.
Okay, so the next one is kind of related, and it's to do with ancestral healing. Right, it's to do with I've specifically talked to my paternal lineage, right? I only know a bit about it, but what I do know, and this is often the way I work, is I work from a point of feeling. Like, that's my truth. I can't. So yes, there's facts, but there's the things that I feel and I've always felt, and I know them to be my truth.
Yeah.
So there's a sense that I have this incredible, overwhelming sense of power down my paternal lineage. There is a whole bunch through my maternal. There's a bunch of traumas that I can feel on that side too, but they don't feel as pertinent, and they don't feel as much like I'm here to deal with that right now. And I've always felt this sense of carrying a lot of guilt and shame from that side, and misuse of power.
Yeah.
And what little I do know about that side, just to give some context, my parents migrated from the US when I was younger to New Zealand before I was born, actually. And so they grew up in the US. My father's side was sort of he was a southerner, and if I go down his line, essentially fairly wealthy. Probably, I don't know how many generations you have to go back before they were sort of slave owners and things like that. So there was a very there's a sense that
there's a lot. There's a lot there. Yeah.
But there's a lot that feel like I'm carrying, and as a very empathic, energetic being, I can feel it so much, and my natural response is to suppress that. And the challenge I have is that where that power feels like it sits is in my sacral chakra, which is in the space.
Same place,
right?
Yeah.
And so it's a delicate dance to allow that energy to flow.
Yeah.
But allow it to flow in a useful and meaningful way.
Yes.
You give me some thoughts on
that. Many thoughts, Justin. Okay. So thank you for sharing this. So first thing I want to share here is just a little understanding around the chakra system. Justin, you know this, but for people tuning in, the chakra system, its intent is for energy to flow upwards. So if something is getting blocked in a certain area, as Justin is describing, within the sacral space, in this case, due to ancestral aspects and stories and emotions and pain, then this needs attention, right? Because if that energy is getting stuck there, it's not moving into our place of power in the solar plexus. It's not moving up into our space of love and expression and, all of the other spaces that come after. So this is where we need to bring our practical insights and the next step forward. And this is my next point. Because you're bringing in this topic of ancestral healing, Justin, one can start to get overwhelmed by all of the things, right? You gave a very quick synopsis of your line, but for most of us, it's not quick and it's not short. It's long and full of many pains, traumas, challenges, and shadows. So the second understanding here, Justin, is to realize the way through this is releasing attachment and expectation that you need to do all the things. Because this is often where people get stuck with ancestral healing and starting to incorporate it within the body and wanting to step forward to release maybe into some more beautiful sensitivity and emotionality. We feel that we need to do all of it at once. And that is not the case. We need to do the thing that is showing up for us most prominently in this moment. So let's go back to your example, Justin. You're feeling this imbalance of maybe power in this sacral space. Okay. So the next step is, where is that showing up? It's not going to be showing up all the time, right? I'm sure, Justin, and I'll throw it back to you here. Is this showing up in a very specific situation, maybe with a person, place, or thing?
Yes, I would say a lot of it sort of probably plays out with my partner, with my wife.
Good.
And so I see it very much, the dependency, control, power
Yeah.
play thing come out. And interestingly, and I can't share too much, but basically there's a complete contrast, because my wife has been on the receiving end of not from me, but in a previous life, in a previous world, that trauma. And
Yes.
so I feel that immense power, and I also feel the immense responsibility to look after that power,
Yes.
and to
Good.
allow it to channel in a responsible way.
Good.
Um,
So
so
let me give some solutions here, Justin, to you. And because I think this example that you've highlighted with your partner, for a lot of men, this is very relatable. So I'm going to get spiritual here with everyone in terms of what you can do. The first practical insight here, because you've brought in ancestral healing, Justin, I'm going to go ancestral, and I'm going to make this very, very simple to understand. This wound didn't start with you, right? It started, as you highlighted, down this ancestral line. So what that means is that there are ancestors that both are yearning for you to be the breaker of this chain, and potentially ancestors that have done more steps towards breaking it than you. So what am I saying here? What I'm saying here is, in these moments where you feel this imbalance of power or this responsibility to channel it in the way that you deserve with this partner, you connect to those ancestors. You intentionally, as you beautifully highlighted earlier, you set the intention of connecting to those ancestors with those same chains, those same wounds, and you ask for the specific guidance, right? It might be, how do I support my partner with this urge and this power that's moving through me? It might be, how do I stand strong in my beautiful masculine power, but also not let it consume me and cause negativity and pain in my external world, right? Those are just examples, but you direct it towards the ancestors. And then finally, you open your heart to the guidance that comes through. And what I mean by that is, we often place expectations on what that guidance should look like, right? Maybe a vision or a feeling or a color or a sound or a shape or whatever. All are beautiful. But it's important to open our hearts to the unexpected, because if we're stuck in this loop, it's mostly due to us doing the same thing over and over again. So what we need is not more of the same. What we need is something new and something unexpected. How does that all resonate, Justin?
beautifully, beautifully. So it's I shed some light on some experiences actually that led to
Please.
me meeting my partner. So through my, I guess, early 20s, I spent a lot of years traveling around the world, mostly South America, India. And I sort of got lost in that life. I sort of let that life sort of take over for some time. But through that life, there was also some periods of time where I connected with my relatives in the US. And I do believe that these were for very specific reasons at different times, right? And they were pretty powerful, in particular, two powerful men
These
in
were
my life.
living relatives, right?
Living
Yeah.
relatives, yes.
Yep.
One was my uncle from my mother's side, who had leukemia, and I sort of watched him die over several years, if you will, and had a very strong connection with him. And the other was my father's stepfather, who actually initially I arrived, and I spent time with my father's biological mother, and she I was very close with her, And it felt like that was almost some sort of divine timing. It's shortly after me arriving, she allowed herself to pass away, and then I was able to hold space for her husband for a period of time, which was a really powerful, two very powerful experiences. And what I saw from that was the power of these relationships. So my uncle had a very strong relationship with his wife, and a very strong faith in that relationship, and same with my grandparents. So I saw the immense power of that relationship to their life, and what it meant, particularly at the end of their life. And that had such an effect on me that it wasn't long before I stopped traveling, and I was drawn back to understanding relationship and going, okay, I think I know what I want. One is stability. I just want to be in one place because I want routine, and I want all the stuff that comes with that. And the other was, okay, I'm ready to open my heart. And so with that, I beautifully attracted this person into my life. And so interestingly, as time progressed, what I began to realize and feel is that I had a very strong presence of someone else with me, and I still do to this day. And this is the part of the podcast that for some people they might not be able to relate to, because this is the deep feeling bit.
But Justin, before you continue, I just want to speak to that for a second, because it's important for people to understand. You're explaining it because you understand it, but just for people that are new to what you're saying, what Justin is getting at is these kinds of spiritual, ancestral, sensitive, emotional themes. They are beyond words. I mean, all spirituality is, but particularly what we're talking about today, they're beyond words. So when we add these words to them, I'm a big fan of Eckhart Tolle, and he calls them pointers. That's all they'll ever be. They'll be pointers. But how we can move beyond the pointers is connecting to the feeling. And we can all do this. So I want you to continue here, Justin, and tell us this ancestral connection. But just for men listening particularly, it's okay to not have the words. It's actually, I would say it's better, because your truth is sometimes without word. So keep going, Justin.
Yeah, and I thought I'd make that comment because I in my own work with other men, I have noticed that at some point you can sometimes lose people if you don't give some context to understand, because not everybody has that same awareness of what that feeling means, or has the desire to even put it into words. So as I was saying, my grandmother had this presence that sort of came into my life, and she's here now. It's just this sort of energy, this feeling on the right side of my body that there's someone always there, and it's a feeling of support and guidance.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like, and it feels just of unconditional love, no judgment whatsoever. And it's a beautiful thing to tap into, because it's always there, and it's not a part of myself that feels the need to judge myself in any way. It's just something that's always there. And the judging side is the really interesting thing to move through, because that's the bit that causes separation in myself. And I often hear the word ego talked about, and I've seen lots of there's a lot of content out there on what the ego is, what it is, should we nurture it, should we destroy it? And certainly I grew up in the environment, and the beliefs that I was taught is you were to destroy the ego. The ego is bad, and all sort of concepts around ego they never really made much sense to me. And so I sought guidance on this about a year ago, to understand, can I be shown some way to understand what ego is, because I haven't seen anything that made any sense to me. So if I can, I'd like to share what I was told, and see if it resonates.
Please, Justin, but just before you do, before we lose the thread of your beautiful grandmother being here, I just want to expand on that for all the men listening that are new to the ancestral connection as a part of their emotional and sensitive body. I just want to make this super clear and empower all the men. This is not a Justin thing. This is not a Harrison thing. We all have access to these kinds of loving spiritual support, not just ancestral in the case of past relatives, but many kinds of spirit entities, I would classify them as. And I've done episodes on it and we won't talk about it here, but before we continue, I want to encourage men listening, a part of your sensitive and emotional journey from weakness to power is learning to embrace that and asking for support not just physically, but in this ethereal spiritual realm. So let's keep moving with that, Justin. Let's hear your beautiful definition of ego.
Well, before I jump into that, I do want to sort of echo that, because
Yeah,
that is,
please.
it's a really, and I feel okay talking about this stuff in this space, because I feel people that are probably attracted to the space are probably,
Yes.
perhaps have some inclination towards it. But certainly I know it's not always relatable, right? And so it's a very powerful sort of sense of connection. And the more I explore that connection to things outside of me, but that are essentially part of me, the more I see. And there are other things that that I've been alluded to, like the concepts of spirit animals and things like that, that have sort of started to sort of show
Expand.
themselves, if you will,
Yeah.
as I express that love for something. It sort of steps out a little bit further each time, which is
Yes.
an incredibly powerful thing.
Because you realize it's endless, Justin. You remember, this applies to all education, but especially spiritual education. You start to remember that the closer you get to the sunrise of knowing it all, the further that sunrise starts to expand and keeps going. So it's truly endless.
That's right. And it all sort of feels, it just all just feels so connected. And it's
Yes.
just, I think that's that difference between that separation and connectedness that I think is probably one of the key themes of my life. There's sort of these aspects, these actions that I can take that do one or the other. And certainly connecting to my spirit side, my ancestral side, is a very powerful thing, and powerful guidance for dealing with particularly inner child and ancestral healing kind of elements. Very, very, very powerful. So coming back to this, when I asked about, okay, explain to me what ego is, and I've heard you say, what is emotion? It's energy in motion. And I got told that the go is where the energy and motion goes. And it is basically all expressions of ourselves are the ego. And so there's many different ways. And so sometimes the reason the ego gets a bad rap, because some of the expressions of ourselves are things that are being unhealed traumas that are being expressed in order to receive something back. But there's also expressions of ourselves that we're expressing just to give, purely for giving and out of love, right? And so I got told that there's elements of that are related to the inner child, and that's where the expression is seeking something in return.
Yes.
And there's elements of myself, and you've helped me see this, where I'm expressing myself from a really powerful point of view, that are my divine feminine and my divine masculine, and I'm expressing and I'm giving, but I'm not expecting anything back. I'm just coming from a pure place. So
You're
that's
divine. Let's break this down, Justin. Yeah, let's break this down, Justin, because I'm so happy that you've come to this remembering, in my opinion, of what the ego actually is, right? This is for people that have tuning in, that have read my book or are interested in reading my book. I have a chapter talking about this. I have a chapter talking about not the ego, but the unhealed ego, because the ego is not the challenge. As Justin is beautifully highlighting, the ego is our individual human self, or the individual human expression. And it is innately not good or bad. It is a vehicle of expression. the question we need to ask ourselves, and relating this to the topic today at hand of being a sensitive and emotional man, is what are we expressing through that lens? Are we expressing, as an example, as Justin highlighted, an inner child wound of abandonment that may come with some very suppressed anger and rage as a man, right? If I'm too emotional as a man, it's often categorized as maybe rage that I'm taking out on someone. Or am I channeling through the ego identity some very powerful and confident anger that needs to be expressed, right? Two very, very similar energies of anger, but two different expressions, right? When I stand in my anger, I put a line in the sand and say, I matter, right? I'm not taking it out on a person, place, or thing, but I'm using it as powerful energy to help me stand strong. So it's not a conversation around being broken in the ego. It's a conversation around what is moving through it, and can something be shifted for more alignment?
Beautiful. And I think part of what you're alluding to here is also, there's this, as a sensitive, empathic man, there's always been a strong connection to the divine feminine side,
Yes.
whereby and expressions of love and compassion and caring and understanding does come very naturally in an extent. But there's this other side of which is also love, but has structure, planning, wisdom, all these other things that
Yeah.
is a little bit, feels a little bit foreign to an extent, until I step into it and connect with it, and then I go, oh, this is also me. This is actually me as well.
Yeah.
And it's
beautiful.
it's not that doesn't express itself. It does express itself often, but it's often that I don't identify that that's an expression of what that is. That power, that immense power, that is so loving and so wise.
Yes.
That yes, it's the connecting with that divine masculine expression has been probably one of the biggest challenges, and the stuff that I've that you've helped me with, is to see that in a completely different light, because that balance is needed.
Yes.
And I think that balance I see in the work that I've done through men's groups, and there's some fantastic men's groups which are, we can touch
Recommend.
on some how we can connect from that side as well. But there's amazing examples of men who embody that out there, and I really do think it's probably not a bad segue actually to talk about how do we in this life, in this environment that we currently live in, there's a sense of disconnection between men, and particularly between generations. And
how do we overcome
that? And I've certainly experienced an immense value from connecting with certain men in my life who have shown me different ways of being a man. And
let's talk about this, Justin.
Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about this. So just before we do, I just want to quickly hit on that balance that you were talking about between allowing the divine masculine through and the divine feminine, just for people that are new to this, because I want to make this as accessible as possible. Whether you are in a physical male body or a physical female body, right? We're talking about the physical males today, but whatever one you're in this lifetime, you have both of those divine energies, right? You have a divine masculine energy and a divine feminine. And the balance that Justin was talking about, that's our normal state. We deserve to be in that balance. So if you are not balanced for whatever reason, there's no judgment, but you deserve to come back to that balance as your natural state. And one of the ways, as Justin is highlighting, is through the reflection of other people. In this case, through the reflection of another man or a men's group. And I'm going to keep it simple, Justin, and then you can add your experience on this. The reason that this works so well is because we aren't just a spiritual being. We are two things simultaneously. We are a beautiful spiritual being that has all the answers inside of us. That is a very real reality. But at the same time, simultaneously, we are a human being that has that ego that we just spoke about, that is full of pain, full of challenge, full of trauma, ancestral inner child, all the things. And when we see that, we realize that that human being has also lived for generations, not by itself. It's lived for generations in tribes, in communities, in families, both biological and non-biological, to reflect back that which is needed to be seen, right? As you said, other ways, other perspectives that we all get lost in, right? One of the big things around the ego, and I'll throw back to you here, Justin, is that the ego gets stuck in belief systems. It gets stuck in a way of being that it believes to be true and the only reality. And one of the ways we get out of that is by seeing another reality reflected in another beautiful spiritual being having a human experience. So I'd love to hear your experience, Justin, around, being in these groups and how it's supported you.
So it's amazing when you look for something, how much things present themselves. And there are actually there's a huge amount going on behind the scenes, right? And I think there's for quite some time been a recognition that men are struggling. Right? We're moving into the last 50 to 100 years have been quite a lot of changes happening, particularly for men.
Yeah.
And we haven't caught up, and particularly I don't feel like we've been catching up in the space of feeling and expressing. And there's a special connection that happens when men do that together. And I think it's something that has partly just been lost due to the way that we live at the present time. But there is a huge opportunity to rekindle that.
Yeah.
And really put that out there for any man who feels called to put yourself out there and connect in whatever way makes sense for you. Right? It could be someone who's already in your life, could be someone who you meet on the street, it could be you reach out to someone online. But there's a huge amount of men who are also yearning for the same sense of connection
Yeah.
that has been missing, particularly intergenerational, and it goes both
Yes.
ways, from older to younger and younger to older.
Yeah. It's
And
big.
there's something inherent in our DNA that needs that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to gain from seeking that out. And immensely, everyone benefits. Everyone in our life benefits from that, because we're essentially sharing different ways of being.
I want to ask something on that, Justin, before we have to wrap up here. Thank you I can feel your love in that. I felt it this whole recording, but particularly in this, and I feel how passionate you are. I just want to illuminate a limiting belief that can come between men and that act of connecting and reaching out. And it's a limiting belief of asking for help is a weakness. Asking and reaching out for support in any way, especially in the ways that you just described, is a weakness. And I think this is a beautiful place to end this chat, because I think this is probably one of the most prolific barriers to men stepping into their sensitivities and their emotionality. How have you moved through that, Justin? How have you moved through this limiting belief that seeking support means that you're failing or that you're less than?
I feel like, and in fact, I feel it now in being here with you, is there's a sense that actually I'm sharing my power. This is actually an expression of my power in doing this. So it actually, all the things that I've been taught about not expressing, the way I feel when I do it is the opposite, because when it's received, you can tell how that person receives it. And there's an immense power in being able to do that and to have the opportunity to do that. So I really small steps. It doesn't take much, and like I said, it can be as simple as connecting differently with someone in your life, asking another layer of questions, asking them how they feel. It doesn't take much, but those little steps can build, and then this is how we grow a community. This is what we're talking
Beautiful.
about.
Thank you, Justin. I love you, my friend. I appreciate you coming on the show and stepping into this dynamic with me. It's been a pleasure, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for spending time with me today.
Likewise, I really appreciate the opportunity to dance in your light. You hold a beautiful space.
Thank you, my friend. For all the men out there today listening, men and women, but I want to speak to the men because of the topic today. I really encourage you not just to listen and feel these words that Justin has expressed and myself, but take some beautiful, masculine, inspired action and really see how that starts to shift your relationship to being an emotional and sensitive man. If this chat today has hit your heart, please share it out with a friend, a family member, a lover that you think it can support and give insight to. And leave your comments and feedback over on Apple and Spotify. It helps us build more shows. And if you like these kinds of community episodes, please let me know and I'll do more in the future. But until next time, here on the Cosmic Love Antenna, both Justin and I send you love, we send you light. And until our next recording and next meeting, we'll see you again very soon. Bye, everyone.